In this video we're going to repair a rusty brake line on this Mercedes SL55 or R230. The techniques and procedures we'll use will be the same for repairing any brake line. The difference with this car is it has the SBC brake system, so we have to take extra steps. I'm going to try and repair this brake line without hooking the car up to a scanner and without hooking the car up to the Mercedes star system, and I'm just going to rely on the backup brake system that these cars have for the front brakes. So there's a small master cylinder in the car that we should be able to utilize in order to squeeze out brake fluid and bleed the front brake line without having to resort to using a scanner or a Mercedes tool. If you are going to try and attempt to use this method, it's really important that you get everything out of the car that you're going to need, like the wheel jack, the wheel brace, the special locking wheel nuts, that you've opened the bonnet of the car, because once this car has shut down, you do not want it to wake up again while you're actually doing this job. Once you're confident you've got everything out of the car, you've opened the bonnet, we're going to go round and open one of these doors and leave the door open until all the lights in the car go off. It can take up to 20 minutes for this car to shut down. While the car is shutting down, we're going to loosen the wheel nuts on the ground, and then we're going to jack the car up and put it on a jack stand. It's been about 5 minutes since we left this door open. The interior lights have gone off. We should be just about ready to start working on this car.
Another way to disconnect the SBC pump is just to disconnect that connector there. I'm not going to do that for the purposes of this video because I want to see if it's possible just to do it with the door open. First thing is to pop this little cap here. Mercedes has a screwdriver in the toolkit that you can use, and this is where the wheel jack goes in.
Now remember, before we jack the car up, we're going to loosen these wheel nuts. We're not going to take them all the way off, and you must remember to take out the locking wheel nut from your boot if you've got one. We've loosened all the nuts, we haven't taken them out. Before you start jacking the car up, make sure you chock the back wheels so the car can't roll. Wheels off the ground, you can just take the remaining nuts out. Now that we've got the wheel off the car, you can see the brake fluid leaking here. You can see how rusty all of this is. We've also got a transmission fluid leak, which will be the next job on this car, to change that transmission pan gasket and the conductor plate. But I always like to put the wheel under the car like that, just in case that does collapse, and also a jack stand like that. This is a good time to check that the brake line spanner that you've got is the right one. This is an 11 and it fits that. Initially I didn't think it did fit, it's just that the nut is so rusty that it didn't want to go on to start off with, but it's definitely an 11. The next stage is to cut the brake line down there, and in order to give myself a little bit more room, I'm going to take off this air vent here, air hose, that just pulls straight off, and then I'm going to take this piece here off, and this is just held in by these clips here, some of which may be missing on your car and some of which may end up being bent like that. If you do take this piece off, just remember where the clips are. There's two here, two at the front and two here. Now you'll notice that clip is completely missing and that clip is bent. If you do have a missing clip, make sure it hasn't fallen into the engine, which in this case it has. We're just going to retrieve that. Once you've got this bit off, this here just pulls up and you can see these clips here clip onto that rubber thing. There's one there and there's one at the back. You could either disconnect that, but we're just going to bend it out the way for the purposes of what we need to do. This brake hose here, if you just push it down, you'll find it comes out of that clip there. It just clips in and out like that. There's one clip here. You're going to have to do the same at the other side there. I'm not sure I'll be able to capture that on camera. Once you've got both of those clips out, this pipe is then loose, and we should just about be able to get our ratchet pipe cutter in there. So I'm going to put a flare on the end of this pipe first before we do anything else, just to make sure that we get a perfect flare. Before we attempt to do the flare, we're just going to very gently run a 3.5mm drill bit to remove any chaff that's inside the pipe. Then we're going to go over around the pipe very gently with a file and just give it a slight chamfer. We're just going to put the pipe into our flaring tool just past that little line there, and we're just going to finger tighten these two
nuts here. Now we're going to use this bolt here, which is the aligning bolt, and we're going to tighten that down all the way in, and then we're going to tighten these two down with this. Go crazy when you tighten these here. They just need to be tight enough so the pipe doesn't slip when you put the bolt in. Next up, we are going to screw in our flaring bolt, and before we do so, we're just going to dab that in the special punch grease that comes with the kit. So you don't need a lot of this. Okay, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to tighten this bolt all the way until it bottoms out. Once again, you don't have to go too crazy. Once that's bottomed out, in theory, when we undo this and undo these two here, we should have the perfect flare on our hands. I was assuming that the pipe didn't move in there. So you should be able to take the pipe out without completely undoing those two bolts.
Let's see what kind of a flare we've come up with. I would say that is pretty much perfect. I'm going to work out how much pipe we need to cut off by using a bit of wire or a bit of string and taping it to the piece of rusty brake pipe that you've just pulled out so that you get the right length, and we're going to cut it along just in case we make a mistake. I'm going to carefully unroll this on a flat surface. Just going to double check that I've got the right length, which I have, and I'm going to cut the pipe here. This just clips on to the pipe like so, and then you just turn, ratchet, and that will cut the pipe beautifully. The very first thing to do after you've cut that length of pipe is to put on the male fitting, because you will not be able to slide that on after you have made the first bend. You can see the piece of pipe, or the shape we need to bend, is quite complicated, and to get these round curves we're going to be bending the pipe around a socket. All of these curves are very similar. We're just going to carefully bend the pipe around the socket to get it to this shape. Just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm just going to get a felt tip pen, a Sharpie pen, and just mark where the curves are so I can hold the socket on there. Slowly but surely we're getting there. It's always tempting to bend more than you actually need to, so just take it little step by step. Now this bend up here I'm using a different socket for. This is the 13mm socket. It's a much tighter bend. And similarly this one here, 13mm socket, and it's bending now the other way. We're on the home straight, the last bend, we've marked it. Almost impossible to line up two bent bits of brake pipe, but that is about as good as it's going to get. So this is now the point of no return. We're going to cut that pipe, and as soon as we've cut that pipe, there's no going back. Brake fluid's going to start gushing out of there, or at least dripping out of there. As soon as we've cut it, the very first thing we're going to do is put on the male fitting. It's so easy to forget that. After we've put on the male fitting, we're going to run a drill bit down the end of the pipe, 3.5mm drill bit to give us internal chamfer. Then we're going to run a file around the edge to give us an external chamfer, and then we're going to add the bubble flare. The ratchet clicks onto the pipe first. Okay, we've got that ratchet on, and now we just need to cut the pipe. This is a steel pipe, so it's slightly tougher to cut than the conifer pipe. I think that's it. Super quickly here, we've cut the pipe. Looks like a pretty clean cut. We're just going to put on the male fitting first. Do not forget to put the male fitting on. Next up, we're going to just run a drill inside there and then go around the edge with the file. Next up,
you're going to put your flaring tool on and you're going to push the brake pipe so it's just beyond this line here, so you can see it through the sighting hole there. And then you're going to tighten these two up here, finger tight. When you've got those done up finger tight, you are going to put that bolt in there and tighten it all the way down, and that will center and align that pipe to that line perfectly. Tighten that bolt all the way. Now you can take it out and tighten these two little bolts up. You can do that without dropping it in the engine compartment. That is an added bonus. It's all quite tight in here, so it helps to have small little sockets, and this little brake flare tool here is absolutely fantastic in these tight spaces. Once again, you do not need to go crazy with these two things here. You just need to tighten them enough so that they won't move. Tighten those two little nuts there, and now we put some punch grease on this bolt, and we're going to tighten that down until it bottoms out. We've tightened that down all the way. Now we've just got to loosen it, and hopefully that will be our perfect bubble flare done. Once again, try not to drop that into the engine bay. Moment of truth. See what that came out like. Seems to be okay. Problem I've never come across before. This male fitting, I wanted to see what kind of flare we'd made, does not want to slide up the pipe anymore. This pipe must somehow have got, I don't know, maybe squashed slightly, or maybe just really weird. Never seen that before. Ages to slide that up there. I've no idea why that's so tight on there. The way we did it in the end was with a ratchet spanner round the actual nut, and then a set of mole grips tapping on the back there to slide it up. So I hope that we won't have any issues with paint or anything else trapped in there, but we'll soon find out. We're going to see if we can undo the line here. This is normally where you end up rounding the nut, but we'll soon find out. I think we got that. We're just using a little bit of penetrating fluid, and we're going back and forwards with this just to try and work some penetrating fluid into there, because ideally we don't want to round that off or snap it off. Just about got that off now. I shouldn't really do this with bare hands. Take that clip out now, hopefully. Next up, we're going to see if this bleed nipple comes out. That bleed nipple is rusted in there solid and is not coming out, so we're going to have to switch to plan B. Let's see if we can get the back of this brake hose out, because that's not coming out of there either. Brake hose, it should be a 14mm. Right, well that seems to actually want to come off. Rusted in there solid, but I think the set of mole grips just about got that out. Oh, that's so rusted. End out. We can now get the other end of the brake hose out. We have one very rusty brake hose which will be replacing. Take out this little protector here, clean that up because we'll be reusing that. We've just got to try and pull this pipe through now. We're going to pull it down from underneath rather than trying to pull it above, because that rubber gasket there, that fitting will not fit through that rubber gasket there. We finally managed to pull that piece of pipe through. It disintegrated as we did it, so that pipe was really rusty and it was already leaking, but that could have exploded at any time and left us stranded. So we're going to start off putting this end of the flexible brake hose in, and then when that's tightened up, we'll connect that through there, and then we'll try threading in our piece of brake pipe that we've made. It'd be easier to pop this little grommet out here, because trying to thread through that pipe at that angle is nigh impossible. We've got our grommet here, we've got that threaded through the hole, and we just need to wiggle that from the other side. This pipe through is much trickier than it looks, and to make our life a little bit easier, we're just going to undo that 10mm nut there, take this bracket off. After a lot of wiggling around, a tiny bit of swearing, we've got that through there. We haven't quite put the grommet back in yet. Like up here, obviously we've cut it quite long,
but that should be absolutely fine. Just got to remember to put the clip on first, like so. This pipe is going to fit in the end of there, and then we're just going to tighten that down. After you've got to this stage, whatever you do, do not forget to put on the male. So easy to cut and flare the pipe and realise that you've forgotten to do that. So now we just have to cut this pipe to length, flare it, join the two up, and yeah, that should be job done almost. Marked where we need to cut the pipe. We're just going to use our ratchet cutter, cut the pipe, and then flare it. Go. I'm just going to run the drill through that, run a file around it, and then put the flare on there. Okay, we've got those two tightened down. Now we just need to put in the bubble flare bit. Once again, you do not need much of this stuff, but without it, you won't get a good flare. Okay, so we've tightened that up all the way. Now we just need to loosen that out, and I'm hoping that that will be our bubble flare perfectly done. The flare looks fine, but once again I've got the problem where I must have accidentally kinked that pipe slightly because that male fitting is not sliding up there, which is a bit of a pain. So we finally got that fitting tightened up there. Boy, did we lose some knuckle skin doing it, and we're just going to leave that overnight to see if that leaks. It's the next morning and we don't seem to have any leaks on our union fitting there, which is good news. Last thing we've got to do is get that grommet back in the hole, and in order to do so I think I'm going to take off this height sensor. It's much easier to get your hand in there. This little rod here actually clips in here and here, but sometimes it's much easier just to undo the top nut up here, which is a 10mm nut. With that nut undone, you can push this rod up out the way and get your finger in there much easier. It's easier to push this grommet all the way through and then come from the other side and then clip it in. Ages to get that grommet in, but we got there in the end. Incidentally, if you wanted to lower your car, you would change this link here for a shorter one. We've actually got a set of adjustable links for this car, and at some stage in a different video we will actually be replacing all of these rusty links here with new ones that allow us to adjust the height of the car manually rather than doing it via the star system or a scanner. All the leaks fixed in this car, we will just get a pressure washer in there, clear out all that rubbish in there, and then at some stage we may just try touching these little rusty bits up here with some rust encapsulator and silver paint, because all of this, if you leave it like that, will not improve. Also be at some stage probably renewing all of the hydraulic suspension system on this car, like a torn boot here. You can actually get these boots from a place in Holland, but we'll be replacing all of this rusty metalwork here. Now the last thing we have to do, we've tightened everything up, is to try and get this rusty bleed nipple out, because if we can't get this out, it means we can't bleed the brakes. This is completely rounded. What we're going to try and do is use one of these Minotaur reverse flute fittings. We're going to tap it on there with a hammer. And then we're going to see if, perchance, that comes off. Oh, you... With the benefit of hindsight, you could have tried to heat that with a map torch. The trouble is you'd end up burning all the lacquer off and possibly damaging the seals in the caliper. So we're just going to go through the rigmarole of drilling that out. It certainly won't be the first time we've had to drill out fittings on a Mercedes.